Hi, everybody, and welcome to Geeks Speak Louder Than Nerds, a weekly rewatch podcast for TV shows, movies, and specific instructions on how to perform an emergency C-section on a man who only just got pregnant 37 seconds ago. My name's Nick Farrow.
And I'm Mike Hilty.
How you doing today, Mike?
I'm tired. I don't know why. I think it's because it was really crappy outside all day, but I didn't do a whole lot today. My daughter had ice skating lessons that I took her to, and then we rushed home so that my wife could take her to a pumpkin patch with some friends, and I stayed home with the baby all day.
Nice.
So, yeah, that was a pretty.
Hey, you said just described my ideal morning.
Mhm. So how's everything going on your end?
Oh, we're good. We had quite the busy weekend. We went to the pumpkin patch last night. Me and my wife both took a couple hours off work, so we got to the pumpkin patch before they closed. We
Mm.
picked our pumpkins. They chose probably the largest pumpkins ever designed by man, and I had to carry all of them back to the freaking car. But then after the pumpkin patch, the place we were at, they did a after dark corn maze.
Oh,
And that
nice.
was super fun. We brought flashlights, the kids had glow sticks. It was this giant maze. They had markers set up throughout it, and they gave you a punch pad. And you go to each one, you punch out the number, and then if you find all the markers, you turn it in, and you're entered into a raffle to win. And we had 5 entries. So we're like, let's go, let's
So
do
you're
this.
saying there's a chance.
We were committed. Unfortunately, the entire ride home was marred with my children chastising me because we could not find the number 12 marker. We went back, we doubled back, we went through all the logical places. I never once lost where I was on this in this maze. I was so proud of myself. I was like freaking Google Maps. I knew exactly where we were at all times. Problem was they had like a cluster of like 8 different alleys, and there was just one little section that we didn't go to, and I didn't go that way because it was too close to another marker, and the markers were all pretty spaced. I'm like, there's no way it's over there because like right down the way is number 16, so it can't be that way. So as we're getting the very last one on the opposite side of the freaking maze, I ask a guy, I'm like, hey, where's number 12? And he's like, oh, let me show you. And he like points on the map. He's like, it's like right there. And there was a moment where we were almost there. We were standing like right in that spot. And I sent Lily up the one path. I'm like, look down there. It should be a dead end, but if it's not, let me know. And she gets to the end. She goes, no, it's a fork in the road. I'm like, fork in the road. And I'm looking, I'm like, oh, okay. So then we should go the other way.
Mhm.
And so we did, and it turns out that that fork in the road, had we taken one of the two paths, would have led us right to it. So they're like, you suck.
Mm.
You did it. We got all but one. We're the worst. I'm like, hey
Well,
kids, listen, this is a lesson to learn about reality versus expectations.
well, and then also this is a good time to let your kids know that hey, if you want to make sure to get all 12 of these markers or anything like that, you're going to have to contribute a little
Yeah,
bit
right.
more
Oh no.
and not just rely on me to be able to do all of this. This is exactly why I don't do corn mazes with my oldest, because she would do the exact same thing. We would get to the end and she would look at me and say, why didn't we get all the things? I'm like, did you help me find all the things? No, that's not my job. Like, what is your job? My job is to just follow you around. This is why we don't do corn mazes.
They were
Absolutely.
having fun though. They were asking everybody, "Did you find 12? Have you found it?" No one was able to find it. Like we passed probably like 50 people. No one had found 12. So they really hid that one good. We got to a point where I look at my wife and she looks at me and she's like, "We need to wrap this up." I'm like, "Yes, I agree." So
Mhm.
I'm like, "We're going this way." And they're like, "Where are we going?" I'm like, "To number 1 because this is the only one we don't have." Then we're leaving. And if we find 12, great. And if we don't, oh freaking well.
Oh,
We told the big one though that she's like, I wish this was a haunted corn maze. And I'm like, well, technically it is. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, you didn't hear in the news about the escaped convict that hides in corn mazes and has been killing people? She's like, what? We're awful.
Say you can't say that because wasn't a couple weeks ago in Pennsylvania there was an escaped convict that.
Well, I mean, that was part of the joke. The guy escaped in Philly. So, like, everyone is like, oh no, he's coming this way. And it's like all the reports are like, no, he's hiding in like a Philly suburb. And where do they find him? In a Philly suburb. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with you people? But yeah, no, for an entire week, everyone was like, we got to be really careful because he could be anywhere. I don't think he is.
What are you talking about? You mean a guy on foot with whose face is being plastered all over
Everywhere.
the national news, not just some rinky-dink local news. This is national news that this guy escaped. There's only a finite amount of places that he can go.
Naturally, he was coming straight for us.
Obviously.
But yeah, so we had some fun there. And then the Lily is just, she's an insane person. At one point, she literally said, I'm not worried because I'm not trapped in here with them. They're trapped in here with me.
Whoa.
What? Okay.
Whoa.
So yeah, second childs, man. They are vicious.
Cool.
Yeah, something to look forward to for you.
Yeah, we're already getting stuff like that from the littlest one because we have been trying to encourage her to stop doing some of the crap that she's doing. And for example, our coffee station has a bunch of mugs in there, and unfortunately, she opens the coffee station up, picks up one of like our shot glasses or something like that, looks at us and is like, "Look what I got." We're like, "Put it down," and she does. And then when we say thank you, appreciate that, she opens the coffee cabinet back up, picks it up, and then just looks at us and be like,
watch me. What are you gonna do? I'm little and adorable.
That is part of the problem. But do you think we should get into this episode? Because I'm really looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, I think we should, because I am as well. So this week we'll be watching Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4, Episode 8, Caves.
Once upon a time. Now this is a story all about how.
Have you ever had a dream you want to do so much you could do anything?
Nick, I don't know if you have the same experience. I think we mentioned this once, but I have a gripe about the very, very beginning of this, and it has nothing to do with the episode. It has to do with Paramount Plus. And a special note specifically for Paramount Plus. I'm never going to watch your new show, Bargain. I'm just not going to. Stop showing me the preview for it. And for those who tune in to our Loki episodes, I'm going to have a very similar thought to kick off that with another show that they're trying to get me to watch.
Is it Goosebumps?
It is Goosebumps.
I'm getting, every time I turn on something, it's a Goosebumps trailer. Like, oh my God, not this now. I mean, at the very least, I will give it to Disney, like Hobo Max and Amazon. They put the skip it button. Sorry, Hobo Max is a longer story.
I got there in the end, but
the short version is that's what the kids called it, so that's what we call it now. I like that they have the skip button, but Paramount Plus, and I don't even want to tell them that they're doing this. All you have to do is hit the back button and then go back into it, and the show plays. Like, you can skip it just by hitting back and going forward. It's stupid. Just put a skip trailer button on there, but whatever. I'd rather it be that than like Hulu that makes you watch the damn thing to the end. But anyways,
I guess
I agree.
I guess my big gripe as well is that I pay extra to not have previews.
That's what it is.
Stop it. Okay, rant over, squirrel done, go.
The show opens up and it's Mariner walking into the transporter room to find Boimler there, and she's really excited. Turns out they're both assigned to the same research mission, and Boimler is excited in particular because since they've gotten their promotions, they haven't really been paired up, which right off the bat, I mean, I was there last week. You guys were hanging out in the Sequoia room, but I suppose he means missions. But then also, what this episode will show us is that there's a lot of stuff that we don't see. It's 10 episodes, but They have other adventures that are off screen, which kind of feels like a tease, like, but I want to see those off screen stuff. But
Well, but I'm gonna probably get into this at some point or another, but I actually do kind of like that because did you ever watch the show Community?
Yeah.
The clip show that they had where they talk about all their other stuff and it has nothing to do with any of the episodes. That's
Yeah.
how you do a clip show.
I agree.
I don't need to rehash all of the old stuff that we did. And in some cases, like particularly, I'm looking at the show Friends, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Friends did that all the time where they would rehash certain moments multiple times.
Well, I mean, I understand why clip shows existed. It was a budget thing. They ran out of money. They didn't have anything. They could only film like 10 minutes. And so they were like, make the 10 minutes them talking about things in the past and we'll fill it with stuff. Even Star Trek had to do it once. In season 2, they ran out of money. Actually, Star Trek had to do it twice because in the original series, they ran out of money. They were in jeopardy of being canceled. That's how we got the Menagerie. They cut up the original unaired pilot with Captain Pike and they made an episode around that footage. They did it back then, and then in season 2 of The Next Generation, they did it with Riker. That year was the year of the writer's strike. They were in trouble there. I kind of feel like this episode is kind of poking fun at it a little. I agree. This is the better way to do a clip show. You show us stuff we've never seen before, and I think Lower Decks does a nice job of, poking fun at the idea.
Agree.
Tendi and Rutherford walk in, and everyone gets super excited that they're all together.
It's a Battleship reunion!
It's great to see our team going on a mission, because honestly, even when they were ensigns, they never really went on a mission altogether. They always did the pair-offs, or maybe there were 3 of them, but I think this might be one of the very first episodes where they're all together doing a mission as a team.
We are still missing one person.
Oh God, yeah.
Why?
We sure are.
What is going on? Did they think that just because they gave her one episode pretty much dedicated to her, that's good? It's all good. I know, I get it. You did say last week, I think last week or the week before, we've talked about this recently, where it's probably because of availability. I get that.
I don't even know if it is.
Doesn't change the fact.
Point.
I don't like it. I don't like it one bit.
What didn't I say last week? Like, Talin can't possibly not be in this week's episode. But I have a feeling she got 2 episodes off, and that'll be it for this season. Funny enough, I got to the end of the episode before I realized, hey, Talin wasn't in this one.
I agree. It was during my second rewatch where I thought, oh, you're not in this again.
I don't know if it's a matter of based on how we structured the B plots or what, but I feel like in the end it was just poor planning. Like, I'm trying to think, like, okay, what episodes could have come? So Mariner, number 2 had Mariner learning her lesson after the promotion. Episode 3 had Boimler having to learn a lesson, being in charge of an away mission. I feel like Vexilon is the one you could move, though. Like, you do one of the episodes where they're not, like, you do Parth Ferengi's heart place in the 3 spot, and then you put Vexilon in between the 2 missing Talin spots, and then maybe it works better. I don't know, but I feel like 3 episodes in a row her not being here, it's kind of like I've been given a drug and now I'm going through withdrawal. Like, I miss her. She was a strong part of this season, and now she's just gone. The next 2 episodes better have her in them.
I don't want to say that you just jinxed it, but
I know, right?
I think you just may have, because your predictions so far this season have been pretty mixed, to say the least.
All over the place.
Yeah.
Well, Mariner wants to know about the mission since they are all going down together, and Tendi informs her, we're going to study moss in a cave. And Mariner hates caves.
She's immediately pissed off.
She hates them. They're the worst.
I hate caves.
She especially has issues with communications devices in caves. In fact, last season, she's just like, wouldn't be a day in Starfleet if there wasn't a problem with comms.
That's the easiest thing to put into a situation that kind of just throws a wrench to make the situation harder. You have no comms. So that makes sense. I love what she says when they're actually in the cave, and we'll get to that soon enough. That's what we like to call tease.
So they beam down, and hashtag Tenderford are running off in excitement. Mariner exclaims like she feels like she's been in this cave 100 times. And Boimler agrees. All these caves do look the same.
How can they not, though? Like,
So many-
how much more different can you make a cave?
Well, here's the thing. In animated form, they could do a lot. However, this is 100% a poke at Star Trek.
Yeah.
And that's what I hinted at it last week. So many episodes take place in caves. And as they say in this one, it feels like about a third of our missions take place in caves. And they do. They really, really do.
So why are caves such a big deal for Star Trek missions?
Some of the best episodes are cave episodes, but some of the worst episodes are cave episodes. And each series has them. The funniest part about these caves is that they were filmed. So TNG on, and I don't know if they used them for DS9 and Voyager, but I know for the bulk of TNG, they had a soundstage 16, which they built these caves on, and they didn't do a whole lot to change them from episode to episode. They maybe dressed them a little different, but that was it. They called it Planet Hell, the writers and the actors. So I just love that this is a nod to all the past stuff. But
okay, because that answers probably the primary question that I did have, and I think you answered it. It is not because every planet has a cave that needs to be explored or anything like that, or it's anything of great significance. It is just a way to change up the scene and probably have a more contained episode that has a different terrain.
Typically they were used for quasi bottle episodes. You put two characters in a cave together and they have to try and figure it out, and then you very sparingly show what's going on the ship, but mostly it's for the character development of one person. And then each story that we then hear from these characters in later on in the episode, they all start out with probably the three most common ways to get trapped in a cave. There was an ionic storm, there was a shuttle crash, or there was some kind of magnetic pulsar or whatever that caused a disturbance. So it's so funny because they do recycle these problems so often.
I mean, how many times or how many different scenarios can you come up with in order for you to get trapped in a cave?
Exactly. There was a crystalline entity outside, and it blew a hole in the ground, so we had to hide in this cave. And oh no, we're trapped.
Yeah.
And then Rutherford says, so right after they get transported down, there's a cave-in. They get trapped in a cave-in right away. And Mariner's worried about monsters in the cave and like what kind of strange entity there might be. Cave-ins are always a problem. And after the cave-in, Rutherford even says, like, it doesn't look like there are any secret stairs hidden by secret societies. And that immediately reminded me of the original series. There are so many episodes where they'd beam down to a planet and they'd be like exploring a cave, and it turns out they found like this hidden staircase to a huge underground laboratory. And so like they're just nailing every single major Star Trek cliche when it comes to caves.
See, since I don't have that Star Trek knowledge, the thing that I thought about that episode of The Simpsons where they're watching an episode of Night Boat. And it's pretty much Knight Rider, but on a boat. And the criminals, they get to land. And what's the boat going to do? It can't just go on land. It cuts to, oh, we'll just use that canal. And Bart and Lisa go, there's always a canal or an inlet or a fjord or something in there. And Homer's just telling them, shut up. Like, who cares?
Exactly.
The boat's going to catch them. That is what I thought of when he said that comment.
I also really like Tendi gives them a scientific explanation for why they all look the same. She's like, because all caves have this mineral in it and they're all formed by this science. And it's just like, it's like looking at the camera and be like, ah. So yeah, so we get the cave in, and they're all trying to defend cave missions, but then the cave in happens, and we get annoyed Mariner and Boimler eyes to credits.
So after the opening credits, Mariner is still whining, and Boimler tells her to knock it off. He'll just call for an evac.
Bunch of rocks always beat centuries of technological progress.
Mariner then kicks the moss that they're studying, and the moss starts to glow as a reaction to her tantrum. With the entrance blocked, it looks like they actually may be stuck in there for a while. Just then, the moss starts moving towards Mariner, and Tendi is trying to reassure her, but the moss starts eating Tendi's boot. Boimler and Mariner then use their phasers on the moss, but it grows back instantly. So we are dealing with the situation with carnivorous moss, which further irritates Mariner.
You want your I told you so's one at a time or all at once?
Which is completely understandable because what a great thing to be stuck in a cave with than carnivorous moss. Boimler calculates at the rate the moss is growing, they only have a couple of hours before the moss eats them. So ever the optimist, Rutherford tries to suggest that they all have been stuck in caves before. One of them should know how to get out of this situation. Tendi agrees and starts to recall a memory of the time that they all got stuck in a turbo lift together. And I don't know if you know this, but turbo lift is not a cave.
It is not. Can confirm.
It is not. And this will be brought up ad nauseum a bunch of times by Mariner. And the funny thing is, so as the camera starts to pan in for a flashback, Mariner interrupts to remind her that they were in an elevator, not in a cave.
Yeah, and we touched on this a little bit. The fact that this kind of thing happens to them all the time, I think, is hilarious. That it's almost like a meta joke that they're saying that they're all experts at being stuck in caves because of just how frequently it happens. And then they proceed to give us several examples of how they've been stuck in caves.
This is just also a good organic way to have a situation where here's the different ways that we can piece together how they can get out of this cave by using different components from each of their stories. Yes, it's a little convenient, but at the same time, it's still kind of nice that we're getting these different stories as opposed to something that we've seen time and time again.
It's also fun because as a Star Trek fan, this is still a wholly original idea. For as much as they're joking about how often this happens, I've never seen an episode where, hey, let's pool our resources from previous missions that we learned a thing on and use that combined knowledge to solve the problem. They would always come up with some new way of getting out of whatever problem they're in, or they'd get rescued or something like that. And here we have a story that not only gives us something new, but then boils down to it being a story about their friendship. And that's also something that we don't ever really get from Star Trek. So that goes a long way in my book for being up there on my rankings.
Yes, this is something that we'll talk about probably a bunch towards the end. That was a component about this that I liked the most because at the very core of this series, it's about this group of ensigns now promoted. It always has been. And it's good to know that this show hasn't lost sight of that. Now that we've been promoted, we're not going to be around as much together. The fact that at the end of this episode, they do talk a little bit more about their friendship and what it means to them is just a very nice touch and the cherry on top of a very good episode.
Absolutely.
Boimler then tells them that he was just recently stuck in a cave with Lieutenant Levy, and they used Gammonite to boost their comm badge distress call. Mariner hates Levy because of all of his conspiracy theories.
Yeah, Steve, I remember. You said Wolf 359 was an inside job.
It totally was.
Which, can you blame her? There are a vast number of people that I would not want to be stuck in a cave with. Conspiracy theorist is pretty high up there.
Right? Unless you're glad that they're stuck in a cave so that they can't be bothering everyone else.
That was... Ooh,
I know, right?
That was rough.
Sure was. But before we get to the end of that story, let's do the beginning. Boimler starts to regale them of the away mission. What started as a regular dilithium survey was cut short due to an ion storm that blew in out of nowhere. Nowhere.
Nowhere.
Nowhere.
The echo at the beginning of each of these stories, that's just a nice
love
touch. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So in the cave on Cryon 4, Boimler and Levy have just gotten away from a bit this ion storm, and it's interfering with comms. Surprise, surprise. Levy then spouts off about some nonsense about the comms upgrade conspiracy because they don't want you to have real comms because then you'll be able to hear what they don't want you to know.
Well, that kind of just goes in line with what I was saying earlier. It kind of is a pseudo conspiracy because that's just a way for the plot to be able to have some type of tension.
Well, Levy is all about conspiracy theories, and I mean, between this show and Moonfall, I'm starting to get a little concerned with Hollywood making conspiracy theorists turn out to be right. Because it's like, hey guys, you're feeding into this. Maybe you don't do that.
But way to go! You're enabling this.
Exactly. He's convinced that the convenience of this storm and them being trapped in the cave has Vendorian written all over it. And Vendorians are shapeshifters, always trying to set people up by being controversial. Boimler, of course, tells Levy that he's insane.
That's what they want you to think.
And he's just simply buying into these stereotypes.
So after looking around the cave a little bit, they find an abandoned buggy, just ready to go. Everything looks great.
Awfully convenient.
Exactly. It looks a little beat up, but it has all-terrain tread, ionic shielding, and a partial charge. The only downside to this is that there's only one seat, which means one of them will have to stay behind while the other goes for help. Levy is immediately suspicious and he pulls out his phaser and blasts the buggy, which causes another cave-in. I thought that he was going to pull the phaser out and demand to take the buggy. This is much funnier that he would just blow it up. Seeing that they are trapped, Boimler is pissed. Levy explains that obviously the buggy was too good to be true, which is fair, and it must be a classic Vendorian morality test. And Boimler loses it with Levy. He may be an outside-of-the-box math genius, but he's been the same rank for a decade because he's insufferable with all of his conspiracy theories.
Wolf 359 was a tragedy. Q exists, Picard isn't some hologram, and Voyager's EMH is!
He asked, do you know who benefits from them being stuck in a cave? Everyone, because they don't have to be stuck with Levy. Oh, that's...
Yeah. Oof.
That's tough.
That's rough, buddy. That's mean. Even for Boimler, that's mean. But I guess maybe that's saying something if Boimler's losing it on you.
I was about to say, has Boimler said something this mean to somebody throughout the course of this series? Because I can't recall.
That's very unlike Boimler. But it shows that he's got a bit of a backbone. Like, he's not just super Mr. Nice Guy all the time. He can definitely be a little critical.
Just then, Levy, in a very dejected voice, says, I just want to help.
With tears in his eyes.
A little bit of a tear, too, which that just makes it even worse.
I know.
However, as he says this, a bunch of rocks around them start to glow and turn into the squid-looking aliens with lots of tentacles. And Levy was right. This really was a Vendorian morality test, and they are displeased. And both Boimler and Levy are surprised as this goes to commercial. I think the thing that I love about this the most is that even Levy kind of has that oh shit moment. There's like, I was right.
Oh wow. I mean, I knew it.
And that was something that kind of kept recurring through this and the next part, after the commercial break, that just slayed me the whole time, where he's just like, yeah, this is something that we make up. I mean,
he knows it's all fake, but also is so willing to stick to his convictions. But yes, we come back and the Vendorians are dragging Boimler and Levy to a pit. They are tied up and Boimler starts pleading with the aliens to let them go. He thought they were just a paranoid anxiety made up by people who needed an imagined enemy to simulate order on unrelated disasters so life doesn't feel so random and chaotic.
Ah, that is what we wanted you to think.
I feel like one of the writers wrote that out of pure frustration because they probably have something like that going on in their real lives.
Right? It's a fine way to help explain why conspiracy theory nuts are the way that they are. It's not that they want to be nuts. It's just they need to find that regular feeling of not being helpless in a situation. So they need someone to blame. But this doesn't sway the Vandorians. They toss the two in the pit and chastise them for not working together and threaten them with punishment. Levy then tells Boimler what he believes that punishment will be. They're going to tie them up face to face and lay brood pods in their necks so they have to look each other in the eyes as their young burst from their chests. I mean, aside from the pure horror show that would be, we're clearly meant to think that this is just a bunch of hoopla, that once again Levy is making up bullshit. But the Vandorians are quite impressed with Levy's knowledge. They couldn't believe that he knew so much of their ways. Boimler then takes that opportunity to talk up how Levy has a true fandom for their culture, even though most people find Vandorians to be preachy and unsettling. We cut then to them all sitting around a table. They all have like these giant cricket things on their plates. And which Levy is just going to town on. He loves this shit. These are delicious.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out, for all the correct info that Levy has been saying, he also has added a lot of hyperbole and misinformation, which the Vandorians find quite quaint and amusing.
We did not, as you put it, do the Klingon Civil War. Agree to disagree.
Levy is still a bit of a crackpot, and Boimler apologizes for yelling at him or something. So Levy accepts his apology and his friendship, much to Boimler's reluctance, but this pleases the Vandorians greatly, and enemies have become friends. Their morality gambit worked.
Huzzah!
So back in Cave Prime with our crew. Oh, and if I didn't mention this earlier, I'm calling the first cave Cave Prime. That's the one that they started out the episode in. It will be confusing when you watch the episode due to the fact that all of the caves look a little bit like Cave Prime, and that they have a main floor, and then there's like some stairs that lead up to like a second level that looks over the main floor. And I just think it's hilarious that each cave has that feature. In the story with Boimler, there's a pit. In the story with Rutherford, that pit is now a lake. It's like filled with water. And then the second level in the story with Rutherford has little tunnels under the second floor. So they all look exactly the same, with just slightly different details. And it tickles me pink every single time. But back in Cave Prime, Boimler's finishing up his story, and he mentions how that Levy's actually not so bad. He's hung out with him a few times since then, and Mariner and Rutherford are like, "What? You hung out with Levy without us? That doesn't make any sense." But then Tendi says, well, sometimes being stuck together can result in some surprising conversations, like that time we were all in the turbo lift. But Mariner, of course, once again cuts her off because this is a cave problem, not a turbo lift problem.
I feel like he doesn't listen.
The moss starts to get more aggressive, and suddenly it spits out this skeleton of this giant animal. And I'm like, okay, where was that?
Where was that? How long has it been in there? How big was this animal originally that it just spits it out now?
Boimler then explains that the Vandorians showed them how to use gammonite to boost comms to get them out of the cave. Rutherford asks if he's found any, but the tricorder has only pulled up trigammonite. This gives Rutherford an idea, but he needs Boimler's pants. Boimler complies, no questions asked.
Just immediately takes it off, doesn't even think about it, just here, have them. And yes, I laughed a lot during this part because even if you have a roommate that you're super close with, there's always things where it's like, really? Okay. This would not be one thing where
give me your pants.
Be like, okay.
What's even funnier though is that he immediately realizes, oh, I had a jacket I could have given you. So Rutherford takes the pants and he puts them on the cave. And Rutherford then tells Mariner to angle her phaser at the wall so it ricochets and hits the pants, which I guess will kind of dilute it. So Mariner pulls out her dustbuster and fires, and sure enough, it vaporizes the pants, but leaves these glowing purple rocks that they need to then separate out, which is the trigaminite. I really laughed because I didn't notice it at first, but on second rewatch, the crack that he wedges the pants into, and it's a butt crack joke. And then when the pants get vaporized, you just see the pants outline with the crack. I loved it. It's like this show can be so smart, but it's just so wonderful how it's not above making a butt crack joke. So impressed, Boimler asks where Rutherford learned how to do this, and Rutherford says he learned it when Dr. Katz
Her name is Dr. Tana.
and him were trapped in a cave with their kid. And everyone is like, I'm sorry. What?
As they should, because the way that Rutherford says it, he just says it so matter-of-factly and just like, oh yeah, you should know this about me by now. And everybody is just so shocked about this.
He's just like, oh, did I not tell you about that? But yeah, so they, of course, want to know exactly what happened. And Rutherford begins his tale of co-parenting with a foul-mouthed cat doctor.
So Rutherford was assigned to go with Doc to gather some medical ferns on Bulkus 9999. We see a local blue alien lady named Thusa guiding the two through a very similar cave, which looks so much like Cave Prime. Because I'm sure that this was just a nod to how all the caves look very similar, except
all look alike.
Well, it's kind of like how in old school video games, in order to designate that this is a different character, what's the easiest thing to do? Change the color. That's it. That's it. It looks exactly the same, but if you give it a new name and give it a different color, then everything's fine. Their guide is explaining that the ferns they are looking for is in a pond just under the water surface and pulls some out. Rutherford detects some strange readings on his tricorder and wonders if they should get out of there. Their guide tells them not to worry. The brain-eating Garflax
What now?
hasn't lived in these caves for generations. Because, you know, anything that has brain eating in front of it, even if it's not part of the official name, but just it's what it's known for, that's perfectly okay to be in a confined space with. Just then, a four-legged monster jumped out of the water and attacks them, knocking their guide through the wall of the cave quite violently. Katz and Ruthy pull out their phasers and fire on the creature until it flees into a nearby tunnel, but it's too late. Their guide is completely impaled on a stalagmite.
Oh, look at that. I've been impaled.
They do their best to save her, but she says, this body is gone. I will simply procreate my base mind through dermal contact. As she says this, she touches Rutherford's face and then just dies. Rutherford doesn't have time to wonder what happens because suddenly he doesn't feel so good. That's right. Rutherford is pregnant and the baby is coming fast.
Gonna be a mama too.
Just imagine if this is how people can get pregnant and
touch the face. That's all it takes. That's not fun.
You and I both, since we're parents, know the trials and tribulations of what it's like to be partners with somebody who is pregnant. Sometimes it's not fun.
I have no comment. You brave person.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that next part because that could get me in trouble. Anyways.
Well, my headcanon is that Dr. Katz had anesthetic. She just decided not to use it because she doesn't like engineers, because she takes that laser scalpel and just zips it right through him, and all he has to do is bite down on a boot.
A boot. Yeah, that's that, you know, to go from having to just be trapped in this cave to watching your guy be impaled by a stalagmite to getting pregnant to having the doc pretty much give Rutherford a C-section right then and there in a very short amount of time, that's got to be pretty high up there with you're having a shit day.
He even says, he goes, oh, that wasn't a traumatic hallucination.
Rutherford wakes up to a baby crying, and the doc tries to feed the baby a rations bar. She is not a fan of babies and giving the baby over to Rutherford, who is apparently a natural with children.
And at this point, this is where I'm starting to think Tendi is insane for not locking Rutherford down as soon as possible. He's got boys throwing pants at him just by asking. He's great with babies. He has rippling pectorals. She's gonna have to worry about hashtag Nickelford soon, because I'm gonna start going after Rutherford with all of his outstanding qualities.
Okay, yeah. So no, not. I guess what I am wondering is, are you officially on the side of hashtag Tendyford?
No, but I think it's a fun running bit.
Okay.
I still don't like it, but I guess I'm not as opposed to it as if it happens, I won't be as mad.
What I'm hearing from this is you don't actively want it to happen, but if it does, you're okay with it. That's fine.
Yeah, it won't ruin the show for me anymore, which is weird. That would have been a Ted wanting to date Robin ending for me.
Dare you? How dare you?
No.
Yes, I agree with you. It's just bringing that up just breaks.
Make me remember that. You thought it was a traumatic hallucination that you had?
I gave you 9 seasons, and this is the best you could come up with. Okay, great. We are treated to a montage of the two taking turns watching the baby and exploring all the different tunnels, looking for a way out. And they're not having a whole lot of luck. But then once they get to the last of the tunnels, this is when the Garflax returns. They tried to take shelter in one of the tunnels, but it turns out to be a dead end. So it looks like this is it. But then Rutherford holds up the tricorder at the snarling monster and says, please don't eat us. We just want to get out of this cave. And the tricorder interprets it for the monster to hear and stops his advance, and it starts to growl, which the tricorder translates so they can understand each other. Turns out the Garflax was only trying to protect his baby and was living under the water when they were collecting the plant samples. Rutherford asked if he can show them a way out of the cave and promises that they will make sure no one comes to bother the Garflax and his baby again.
We cut back to Cave Prime, and the gang is just completely blown away by Rutherford's failure to share the story with them. Tendi once again tries to drop in her turbolift story, and once again Mariner shoots her down.
That is not a cave story!
But then suddenly the moss starts to really advance on them. Mariner takes off her comm badge, opens it up, and scoops in the trigammonite, to which Rutherford then asks where she learned how to do that. Boimler jokes that with the way these stories are going, she probably learned it from Delta Shift. And the face that Mariner makes during this exact moment was so funny. And she's just like, whoa! And they're like, what? Turns out she got assigned to lead Delta Shift on an away mission a while back, but their shuttle was hit with a magnetic anomaly on the way. We cut to the shuttle crashing through the cave wall and Mariner and 2 ensigns stumbling out. To introduce these guys, we actually have seen them before in season 1. There's an ensign in yellow, Amado. He has an eye patch, which I thought was kind of funny. It was very similar to Rutherford's eye thing. Then we've got Caravitas, who is kind of an angry, cranky lady, very much the opposite of Tendi. And then we have Asif, who is younger and very Boimler-like, only less charismatic. And at this point, I realized that they are the Bizarro versions, like in that episode of Seinfeld, where Elaine starts hanging out with Bizarro Jerry, George, and Kramer.
He's like your exact opposite.
He's Bizarro Jerry.
It's funny because that's what you thought of. I thought about that part in Spaceballs where it's like, you idiots, you caught their stunt doubles.
So Caravitas is giving Mariner the business about the quality of her landing, and Mariner is super surprised to learn that comms are actually working.
Wait, holy comms are working? Haha! Fuck you, cave!
which is a nice turn of events for her. Unfortunately, she's quickly brought back to reality as her communication with Ransom is cut off because they're actually out of range. So they have comms, they're just too far away to use comms.
Just another way to conveniently not have communication.
So just then, Ensign Asif stumbles out of the ship with an injury. His leg is broken at the shin, and it's just hanging off with bones sticking out and everything.
Oopsie.
I was not expecting that, and I had to pause it for a second, not because like I was about to throw up, but I just was caught so off guard by it that I was like, nope, I need a second to collect myself.
Yeah, that was pretty gruesome. So Mariner then she makes the quick switch from jokey Mariner to Commander Mariner and starts giving orders to fix the situation. Caravitas grab the med kit, Amado status report on the engines, and like good ensigns, they actually, yes ma'am, and they get to work. Good news is the shuttle is salvageable, but they're out of power and they need something called Pergium to get it working again.
Good news, everyone.
It just happens to be a deposit of Pergium right over there. It's just a hop, skip, and a jump away.
But there's a wrinkle in this cave, which we'll get to in a second. So we see a glowing pile of blue rocks, and Mariner starts to walk towards them, but when she does, she starts aging at an alarming rate. Turns out there is a mineral vein that emits chronotons, which means anything organic will experience a biotemporal flux. Caravitas won't be stopped by this. She is convinced that she can make it to the Pergium. Mariner chases after her, and as they both start to age older and older, it gets harder for them to walk. Caravitas starts giving Mariner crap, again saying that she will age more gracefully because she's a better person than Mariner, and that Mariner has always hated her because she is a Delta Shift person.
These creepy Delta Shift guys have always rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, what, they do our jobs while we sleep? So weird.
Mariner tries to order her back to the young side and explains that she hates her because Caravitas is an asshole. Just then, both of their backs give out and they fall to the floor. Caravitas then admits that she is only an a-hole because she works just as hard as Mariner, but because she's on Delta Shift, she doesn't get any face time with the senior staff because everyone is asleep. She's just as deserving of a promotion to lieutenant junior grade, but won't ever get to rank up because nobody knows they exist. Mariner always assumed that Delta Shift hated the Beta Shift because the Betas broke stuff during the day and the Deltas had to fix them at night, which is probably fair because I know from talking to our maintenance staff at work, they hate all of us because of all the crap that they got to fix for us who are on first shift. So,
of course.
Yeah. Mariner apologizes and Caravitas accepts just before she breaks her hip. They need someone younger, and it turns out that Asif is a lot younger.
He's a boy genius.
Sure. He just needs to hobble his broken ass over there. He starts to crawl over to them, but because his leg wasn't set, it starts to heal wrong in the time dilation. I didn't think that it was going to go the way that it was, where it just completely just falls off, but
it did. It was so gross.
It was just so gross, but it was also funny as well.
You should see my kids' faces when this happened. They were both like, "Ah!"
As they should. Just as he's about to give up, they encourage him to go further because he's still young. He stands up, and a broken part of his leg just completely falls off. Just then, Amadou calls from the top part of the cave, and he's just a little boy. And it turns out that there's more Pergium at the top of the cave, and the time dilation works in reverse, so they all become younger. With the shuttle repaired, they are free to escape the planet, much to Asif's dismay, since they left behind his broken off chunk of his leg.
I'm done being old, so we're just gonna have the doc grow you a new one.
But it's okay. They can just grow it back. It's fine. The future is great.
So we're back to Cave Prime, and this story really upsets Boimler and Rutherford. All of the stories have really brought to light how they haven't really spent much time together lately, and they're starting to grow apart. It's really apparent that they're making friends outside of their friend group.
This does happen when you do get promoted at work. You're hanging out with a different group. You've got different responsibilities. You don't have time for your existing group of work friends.
I think that's a fear that we all face. It's when a friend of yours makes a new friend, there's that fear that you have that they're not going to have as much time for us anymore. And it's gonna be the beginning of the end, essentially. And that is a part of life. People grow apart, but still not a happy thought. And it's very clear that that's why they're all getting upset. They don't like that Mariner has formed a bond with Delta Ship. Rutherford's not telling them everything. They're making new friends. Really, their anger is boiling down to just fear. They're afraid that they're not as close as they used to be. It's a concerning thought because they want to be best friends. As Rutherford goes to call the Cerritos, they are finally attacked by the moss.
Mhm.
And the moss then just plasters them to the wall. So they're like completely covered in the goo.
Why am I drippings with goo?
And it starts talking to them.
I
And
died during this part.
It's so
Great.
funny because like it goes right back to what Mariner said at the beginning of the episode. Hey, if there's any strange creatures, show yourselves now so we can get it out of the way. But sure enough, it didn't. It decided to not show itself. But the moss has been listening to their stories. And the moss tells them that they can't leave until he hears the green one story.
The green one story.
And I like to believe that he calls her the green one because the moss is also green. And so he felt like bad that Tendi kept getting shut down. So finally, it's time to hear Tendi's story about the turbo lift, which is definitely not a cave. And we need to make that absolutely clear that even though a turbo lift is something you can get stuck in, it is definitely not a cave. Tendi recalls back to the first season, actually, at the very end of the first episode, which was her first day on the Cerritos. We cut to that episode, and Mariner is arm around Boimler. He's gonna be her chadich, and they all break out the alcohol for having survived the rage virus outbreak that befell the ship that episode. And we get a nice montage of them drinking. When they're all finished, they leave the bar and they start heading to their bunks. Mariner admits to having switched the synthahol for real alcohol, so they are plastered and they are not getting back to normal anytime soon. Which, if you are unaware, they have a thing on starships called synthahol, which you just kind of like shake your head and the alcohol effects go away. It was designed for starships so that way if a red alert happens and you need to get onto duty, you aren't drunk while doing it. But they're real drunk.
I need to sleep for a year minimum.
So they can't do that. But Boimler reassures Tendi, it's okay. Everybody on the ship is like sleeping right now. So there won't be any real problems for at least several hours. So they get onto a turbo lift and it starts to move, but then suddenly stops. And Billups informs them that all the nonsense has caused the turbo lifts to go down and it'll be a while before they can fix it. Cut to 2 hours later. And they're all just sitting in the turbo lift, making the best of it. They're playing a Star Trek version of Horse, which, if you aren't aware, Horse is a popular Hooper Ball activity made famous by Eric Durant, whom I'm fairly certain you don't need to look up. That's a pretty confirmed fact. But they're using Boimler's jacket and their socks to throw the socks into the thing to spell out the word Targ, which is a Klingon animal.
Nice.
They all laugh when the sock hits Boims in the face and sticks to his nose. Cut to 3 hours later, and now they're playing charades.
Is it a living thing?
Nope.
Is it an isolinear optical chip?
Yes! Holy crap! You got it in two!
Cut to 4 hours later, and we get the classic Jonathan Frakes God shot. Frakes loves doing this shot when he directs episodes of Star Trek, where it's essentially a shot from above, real high up. And we're directly overhead of our lower deckers. They're just completely exhausted, laying in a big pile. Boimler's got his head resting on Rutherford, who's resting his head on Mariner's stomach, who's resting her head on Tendi's stomach, who has her head on Boimler's stomach in a cute little like circle. I thought it was really, really sweet the way that they were all laid out like that. And Tendi says that this has been one of the best days of her life, despite having had to pee in the corner. And but she was really worried about being the only Orion on board because of their reputation. But Rutherford reassures her that all they see is a smart and capable ensign, as he yawns and starts to fall asleep. Mariner agrees. She's a lower decker just like them, and all Boimler can do is snore because he's passed out. And Tendi is glad that they are her friends. And it is by far one of the sweetest moments. And the picture of them together will be the thumbnail when I post this to socials, because it's one of my favorite images of the entire show.
Yeah.
It's so sweet. I love it. But the sweetness doesn't last. Because just then, Shax bursts in, screaming, "I'm here to save you!"
I have a question about the timing.
Yeah.
I did not interpret it that it was 2 hours and then 3 hours after the 2 hours and then 4 hours on top of that. I kind of interpreted it as 2 hours and then the next hour, that's 3 hours total, and then the next one is 4 hours.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, if it was a total of 4 hours, fine. But they do the whole 2 hours later, and then they do a scene, and then they say 3 hours later. So I assumed it was 3 hours after the scene we just saw. So my assumption is that this was them being trapped in a turbolift for 9 total hours, playing games and commiserating over the adventure that they had just gone on together as a team. I mean, 9 hours trapped in the turbolift, you're going to be best friends for life after that.
I'm actually going to push back on that because I've been trapped in an elevator for 20 minutes and we were all ready to strangle each other.
Who are you with, though? Did you just go through a life or death situation in which you all had to work together as a team to stop a rage virus from taking over everyone on the ship and infecting the crew, followed up by maybe 2.5 hours of drinking and partying?
Use your next words wisely.
Back in Cave Prime, they were all laughing at their reactions to Shax saving them. Mariner almost peed a little. Boimler fully releases his bladder, and Rutherford says that was the best time he ever had being stuck in something.
Okay.
Mariner apologizes to Tendi for constantly cutting her off every time she tried to tell that story, as she should, because that was just a very nice and sweet moment. Tendi says that she wanted to tell it because no matter what happens and who they start hanging out with outside of their core group, they will always be friends. This really moves the cave moss, and he asks if he could be their friend and they can keep telling stories. They all start going into other cave stories that they have, and as the camera pans out, 2 rocks in another part of the cave morph into Vendorians. They are glad their test has helped the junior officers rekindle their friendship and that it worked. It's happy friendship music and laughter to credits.
They have passed our test.
Should we unblock their communications?
Nay, let them enjoy this moment for a little longer.
Well, did you like this episode, Mike?
I did. I liked it a lot. This is one of the better episodes. I'm sure, as you're about to say soon, that there's probably a lot of context in this that I'm missing that would probably vault this up even higher. But as somebody who has not consistently watched Star Trek, I did like this a lot because it offers a lot for character development. It's a great way to kind of creatively solve a problem by having everybody contribute. And all the stories are fantastic, which this is the question I had for you. How would you rank each of the 4 stories that were told?
That is a tough question. I think the Boimler one was I guess if we're including Tendi's is my favorite for obvious reasons. And then I think I'd put Boimler's in there because I think that one was the funniest. And then I'd go Rutherford and then Mariner.
I think the only thing that I would do, it's a toss-up for me because I really like Rutherford.
Yeah, I do too. There's a level of expectation with Dr. Katz, though, because she can be so funny, and they kind of sweetened her up a little because of the baby. And so they kind of sanded off her edges for the clip, which wasn't bad. I enjoyed it. And it's nice to see Anna get more to do than just be vulgar and funny. But yeah, I think I liked Boimler's just a little bit better because it was sillier.
Yeah.
This episode does something that not a lot of Star Trek episodes do, in that it made the episode about the characters and not necessarily the situation. At the end, it was all about them being friends and their friendship would live on. And in a way, it kind of harkened back to the finale of The Next Generation, where we didn't always get friendship stuff with them, but the little glimpses we did, they would do poker games from time to time. And most of it would be the senior staff or some of the members of the senior staff playing poker. And they would always do a few poker games a season to just start off an episode usually. And in the final episode, Captain Picard comes down and he asks if he can join them. And they look at him as he sits down at the table and he says, I should have done this a long time ago. And they say to him, like, you were always welcomed. And it shows like right there in the very last moments, they're looking at the camera and saying, yeah, we are a family. This is more than just people working on a ship together. And so I love that Lower Decks is not waiting for its final episode to do that, but it's saying like right now, like, hey, these guys, they are the best of friends. No matter what happens, no going forward, especially, you'll always see them together. And that kind of gives me hope for the future. Like, even if Lower Decks only makes it to 5 seasons and they cancel it after next year, I am fully confident that we will one day get a live action show or another sequel series where we see them in the future and they are in charge of a starship together, where they're the bridge crew. And, you know, either Mariner or Boimler is the captain, one is the commander, Tendy's the chief science officer, Rutherford's the chief engineer. That to me is what I want in the future from these characters. And I feel like this episode makes that promise. And even if it doesn't happen for 20 years, it's still a possibility.
I also didn't really, I think we talked about this earlier. I didn't really miss T'Lyn in this episode as much as I missed her in some of the other episodes. I also didn't miss the big, mystery storyline of this season. I didn't miss that either. This is just a nice, as standalone of an episode as you can get for a situation like this. And sometimes I do kind of appreciate this. It kind of reminds me a little bit of what Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 did this year. It's like, this isn't really part of the multiverse story. It's just loosely connected and it's its own thing. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I think this episode also delivers on the promise of the title. It's called Lower Decks, and one of my biggest hangups when the show first started was for a show called Lower Decks, they show an awful lot of the upper decks. One of my biggest criticisms was that we got way too much Ransom, Freeman, Shax, Dr. Tana. It should be Lower Decks focused, and maybe you see what they're doing in the background, and that's played for jokes, but as the show went on, I really appreciated those characters more and more, and I'm glad that they're now mainstays of the show. But to be able to go back to basics and say, like, these are our Lower Decks characters. The show is called Lower Decks. We haven't forgotten that the show is about them and not everyone else. So
yeah,
I liked it. And you alluded to it earlier, and you were correct. I do have a slew of references for you today. However, I don't think that they're really going to change your opinion of this episode. There might be things that if you had known, you might have found it to be a slightly more amusing, but realistically, it's just like background information. Like, you really don't need to know it in order to enjoy the episode, which is, I think, a stay of the best episodes of the show.
Yeah, I don't think any of these are going to really cause me to have my opinion of this go up, because I already love this episode. So if anything, it's just going to add pieces in that are going to be helpful for me to know in the future, or for the final exam that I'm assuming you're going to give me at the end of this season, to make sure that I learn.
100-page essay.
I was an English major in college, so no problem.
All right, there you go. Asked and answered. Well, the only way I can get into this is to say the phrase, I understood that reference.
How can you not know that Spider-Man first appeared in 1962's classic Amazing Fantasy number 15?
Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
Say the line, Bart.
I understood that reference.
In this segment, I will do my best to compile all the references, jokes, and Easter eggs that I can find. This was originally to show off how cool I am, But after a recent basketball conversation involving Derek Durant, I'm not so sure cool is the right word. Really, it's to help Mike understand why I think the F is so funny and to get his perspective. So, well, let's start with the history of Star Trek caves is many and often, but I'll just once again say Paramount Stage 16 was dubbed Planet Hell and is the basis of this episode. I honestly want to go back through and see if I can compile like images of every cave. I'm telling you, they all looked like a variation on the caves that we saw, but I really want to know if they lifted any specifically from specific episodes, and I just didn't have time in the last 2 days to find them. But they all looked a little bit like them. In fact, the one with all the tunnels really reminded me of the cave in the Mark Twain episode, where they go to an alien planet and there's an alien cave, and it looked very similar to that. The Vendorians first appeared in the animated series, season 1, episode 6, The Survivor, where they find this dude in space and turns out it's not actually that dude. It is, in fact, a Vendorian. And so shenanigans ensue, and he shapeshifts into a squid creature. So that was the first appearance of the Vendorians. They also appeared in an episode of The Next Generation where they tried to convince the Enterprise that warp drive was affecting subspace negatively and that they should stop. And then for a while in Star Trek, they weren't allowed to go above warp 4 without permission from Starfleet Command, because they were trying to figure out a way to make their warp fields not as dangerous to subspace, because they were like causing explosions. They were called Vendorians in the episode, but they never appeared as tentacle people.
If you could only hear yourselves.
My guess was that they didn't consider the animated series canon, so they just were using the name. And I don't know if you noticed this, but this happens throughout the entire episode. The voice cast in this is all of the main bridge crew. So the lead Vendorian was Dawn Lewis, who is Captain Freeman. The one at the end is Ransom, and I'm pretty sure the female voice at the end is Dr. T'Ana. And then Fred Tatasciore was the voice of Levy, and he also did Shax. So it was fun picking out their voices. I'm like, oh, they're doing a different voice. That's cool.
If you're not going to have scenes where they go back to the bridge and they're talking about how do we get all these people out of the cave, it's a great way to just keep them involved somehow.
I knew it. I'm good at my job.
Moibler mentions that Levy is an outside-of-the-box math genius, and my assumption is that this is a nod to there's a character in Voyager where Janeway realizes that some of her crew members have slipped through the cracks in terms of getting attention and being, like contributing members of the team. And one of them was this like astrophysicist genius who didn't want to be there. He actually was just on Voyager doing a stint for his school. It was like an internship, and then he got stuck in the Delta Quadrant for 7 years. So he was like this genius as well, who thought outside of the box and was kind of a loner loser that no one really liked. It reminded me of Levy a bit. Mariner says the power caves, man, they can make you friends with jerks. And that's gotta be a reference to a bunch of different situations, because like they would put characters who hated each other in caves all the time. But the one that stands out for me the most is an episode of TNG where the Geordi and a Romulan are trapped in a cave together. They have to learn to work together despite their differences to get rescued. And the fear, of course, is that if the Romulans find Geordi's in big trouble. If the Federation finds them, we know that they'll be fine. But the Romulan is afraid the Federation will treat the Romulan officer the same way that the Romulans would have treated Geordi. So there's that tension that is caused. So like they have to end up working together to trust each other. It was a very good episode. I enjoyed it. But again, trapped in a cave the whole episode. The brain-eating monster in the cave, the Graflax or whatever she called it. I believe, can't confirm, but I believe that's a small nod to Starship Troopers, the brain bug. He lives in a cave and he eats your brains. It's gotta be.
Way to be a good citizen.
That's right.
Referencing a Starship Troopers.
I'm doing my part. The biotemporal flux. So there was an episode of TNG where called Timescapes. Captain Picard, Counselor Troy, and I want to say Ensign Rowe. I can't remember. Or no, it was Data. It was Data. They were on their way back to the ship from like a conference, and they find the Enterprise frozen in time. It looks like it's being attacked by a Romulan warbird, also frozen in time. And it turns out they're in this section of space that has like temporal anomalies in them, and like Captain goes to pick up a piece of fruit on their shuttle, and his hand suddenly ages like rapidly, and it turns into like an old man hand, and then he pulls it out and it's like fine again. But then there was another episode where a transporter accident turns the captain and Guinan and Ensign Rowe into children. So Amado changing into a child is most likely a reference to that, and that episode was called Rascals. That was a fun one. In an episode of Enterprise I learned this week, one of the officers, Trip Tucker, impregnated by an alien who also touched his face and he became pregnant. So that was a play on that.
How progressive of them to have a male
Right.
become pregnant.
You think men don't hold enough cards? You have to take this away from us as well.
Yeah.
Good for them.
Junior.
Yes.
I have very many Junior clips ready to go for this episode.
Okay.
My nipples are very sensitive.
Very nice.
Not only are cave episodes a thing, trapped in a turbo lift episodes are a thing. Being trapped in general, like there's an episode where the Enterprise gets like all messed up and like people are like stuck in different places. There's one episode where the captain gets trapped in a turbo lift with some children, and the captain hates children. So they have to get out of the turbo lift. He has to like rally the kids behind him. So he takes off his pips and he gives them to the kids. The littlest kid, Jay Gordon, he makes him the senior officer in charge of radishes, because that was what the kids' science project was.
Nice.
So at the end, the cave story where they met themselves that they were telling the Moss, that is a reference to the episode of Voyager called Demon. It's a season 4 ep where Voyager needs to land on a demon planet, which is like inhospitable to humans. So they have to get like all space suited up. They come across this weird silver goo, and one of them I think Harry Kim falls into it. They lose Harry, and then they find him and they bring him back to the ship. It's either Harry or Paris. They bring him back to the ship, and then on the ship, he suddenly starts dying. And they're like, what's happening? And it turns out that's not Harry. This silver goo replicated Harry. And it turns out the silver goo started replicating all of them. And at the end of the episode, they made an agreement with the silver goo because it wasn't letting them leave. They're like, we'll let you copy all of us if you let us go. And they're like, all right, deal. So they left an entire Voyager crew made of goo people on this demon planet. And funny enough, they've actually come back later in a later season episode. And that is all of the references I had. Until then, I think it's time for us to pick who our favorites were this week for Nick and Mike's Miraculous Menaginarium attractions.
I'll take you home and lock you in a nice little cage and never, ever let you out.
Do you imprison everything you like?
Of course.
He's so fluffy, I'm gonna die.
The Moopsie is Narja's favorite.
Oopsie.
In this segment, we pick a character from the episode who stood out to us and belongs in a safe and wonderful home, trapped behind glass, 2 windows down from the Moopsie.
Oopsie.
So, Mike, who was your favorite character this episode?
I'm debating between 2 characters. I think I'm going to go for it. I'm going to choose the Cave Moss.
All right, there you go.
And here's the reason why. It wasn't enough that the Cave Moss is carnivorous or anything like that. That was funny and a nice touch. The fact that the Cave Moss just spoke perfect English to them, no like alien language or anything like that, and asked Tendi to say the story, I thought that was really good. But then at the end, when Tendi was done with her story, the Cave Moss is like, I would like to be your friends. Would you be my friend? All of that just causes them to just tell more stories. For all of those reasons, I'm picking the Cave Moss.
Yeah, the Cave Moss was kind of like a bizarro Armus. because Armus was dank and vile and evil, and Cave Moss turns out he just wanted a friend.
Mhm.
Mine is hard. I really don't want to cheat here, but my favorite character was the blob of them laying in a pile, but that's not one character. So understanding that that is my favorite character moment.
If we had a
It's not my
favorite moment,
That's what I'd pick. I mean, I don't want to just pick one of them. At the very least, it would be Tendi, but it's not. It's Shax jumping in at the last minute, yelling, "I'm here to save you!"
Mhm.
Because nothing says season 1 Shax than just uncontrollable rage for positive situations. So I'm choosing Shax yelling at them that he is there to be their savior. What do we've got coming up on next week / episode, Mike?
So our next episode of Star Trek Lower Decks will be season 4, episode 9, which will be in your feed every Tuesday. No episode name or description just yet, but that won't be our next episode in your podcast feed. Tune in on Thursdays, or in some cases Friday at 12:05 a.m. as we bring you Loki season 2, episode 3, 1893, where Loki and Mobius are on the hunt to find everyone's favorite cartoon clock as they try to save the TVA. Boy, howdy, do we have lots of thoughts about this.
Sure, we sure do.
Well, until next time, please like, subscribe, share, trick your friends with a morality gambit, and rate us 5 stars on your listening app of choice. Also, you could find us on social media. I am at MLHilty2452 on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Serialized, which is letterboxed for TV shows.
And you can find me on Blue Sky, Twitter, and Letterboxd at Jagged2319. You can also contact the show at geekspeaklouder@gmail.com or on Blue Sky by searching Geeks Speak Louder Than Nerds. Until next time, I'm Nick Farrow.
And I'm Mike Hilty. Thanks for tuning in to Geeks Speak Louder Than Nerds. Catchphrase!
Bye, everybody. Stalagmite's the bottom one, right?
Look, man.
I didn't research it. I just
don't-
heard it. I'll look it up.
Hold on 1 second.
Stalactite versus stalagmite.
Cue the hold music or the Jeopardy music.
A mound of tampering column rising from the cave floor. Yes, haha, I got it. I think I'm just making more work for myself.
I'm Mike Hilty. Thanks for tuning in to Geeks Speak Louder Than Nerds. Live long and prosper, I guess, or catchphrase.
No catchphrase this week?
You could pick whichever one you want.
Change that shit on me last minute like that, you monster.